In this part of the videos, we're going to go through all the menus up here and discuss most of the items. Some of them would be too complex at this time to discuss any further. The project one, being the one most to the left, are the ones giving you options for saving and licensing and starting new things. And I will not do that very much at this very moment because it's besides the usage, the normal usage of ArcGIS. But the main one, of course, is the map one. And besides the one being paste and copy and cut, which I think are quite self-evident what they're all about, literally select something and copy it and paste it again, you will have the alternatives in next one, which is in the sub-box called Navigate. These ones means, of course, you can extend it and make it bigger and change it, the contents of it. But in this case, I tried to keep it to the ones we've got already here. So with this one, you click this one, you got the normal setting where you literally can move around. With these ones, you got a fixed zoom in and a fixed zoom out. You got this interesting button, the globe, which literally means that you got the entire planet in front of you. If you do want to go back to the previous one, you can use this previous extend navigate. So you go back and you can go forward and back and so forth with a long history, so you can keep tracing your ways back and forward. If you particularly find with any of these areas and objects that you want to keep for further studies, perhaps you want to go back tomorrow and see if something have changed, if you got live data or something, you can add bookmarks. Go to the bookmarks, just write something in the bookmark, hey, and there you have it. Next time you go to the bookmarks, the bookmark hi is available. You can, of course, also go to XY, where you have to fill in the lat and long. Well, it's all dependent on what projection system you've got, of course. And there you go. So that's the first box. The layer box is interesting. You can either change the base map. I'm not going to do that, but as you can see, if you're just changing it, you've got a wide range of opportunities. These are connected to my university, so you might have different sort of base maps. There's an opportunity for you to go to Add Data, where you add an additional file. It literally, since we are navigating to the folder where I have the material, I could re-import them, but then these three ones are already available. I have an opportunity to go to Add Data from Path, which means that I can enter a path for the data, network-wise. So the network path to the data is something that goes into this one. You can also do something quite interesting. It's called X to Y, or XY table to point. In this case, we don't have all the information needed, but if we would have had, for instance, a CSV file format text file, and we could choose this one here, or import it by clicking on that button, and then tell the name of the file that we want to be created from the text information. We just need to design which are the X, which are the Y field variables, Z if we've got it, and what coordinate system, and press run, and that kind of a file will emerge. Now, we also got this option called Add Graphics Layer, and this is, well, not very GIS-y, but you've got the opportunity, of course, if you click it, to go to graphics. As you can see, it started up as a ribbon up here. But in this part, you can go for instance, polygon, and draw something out here, and fill it with various kinds of colors, like this, and change it. Now, this is not GIS. You can move it around as if it was just an image or something. But it might be interesting to use it. I very, very rarely use it, because this is not how I'm using GIS, but at least you have the option. So, going back, that was the layer part. The selection part is very, very interesting. Selection means that you can first of all choose which form you have, rectangle, polygon, or lasso. If you go for circle, for instance, and you put yourself in the middle, you draw a wider sort of longer stretch outwards, and everything that falls within that radius is being sort of selected. Now, if you click on this button, which means clear, you could redo it. Do a little smaller one. You see some of the items were not touched by the border, so they're not selected. Or of course you can choose any other sort of a lasso kind of a thingy and select whatever that falls within it, and then clear it. You can also select it by attributes. Now, if you go for these kinds of attributes, a box that is connected to SQL is arriving. If we go, for instance, for high, where and then say we have a new selection where the ID or FID is equal to, and then in fact we have the options, I assume here. No, all of them are 0, so then we go instead for the ID, and we see still all are 0. Sorry for that. So then if we choose this kind of a value and press OK, you can see all of them are collected, of course. And that makes sense because we had no other options. If I'm going to an attribute table, I can tell you more about these points later. There we have a variation and differences. Some text, very long line, short line, and so forth. So I could go for the line one, a line, some text is equal to short line. And press OK, and you can see only the short line was selected. You can also do it by location, and this I think is quite interesting. If we input the line, and then we specify the relationship that is within high. High is, of course, this big, bold sort of high, and the lines are there. So which ones are within? Only that one. But if you go for select by location and instead choose intersect, we'll see that literally all of them, because most of them are intersecting with one exception. So this is how you can do different sets of selection attributes. And in fact, you can do it even more complex. You can add more and more. Thing is, this has already been selected, but if you go for the attribute, you can add a clause and make it and or and so forth, and make a very complex history of selections. I clear that part. Measure is where you literally just measure by clicking once and twice. You got the full distance. You can continue, trace your way, and double click to make it a final. You can locate, and then you have an opportunity to search for either objects or go for things that are within the material. Not going to do that at the very moment. Infographics is a new or relatively new feature that has to do with the country or the region. This is online material. If I clicked it once, an infographics emerges that tells us a story, a little bit about what happens in the Oslo region. Now, this is not particularly interesting, of course, but, well, here you go. Coordinate conversion. I like this one. I think it's fairly interesting. If you enter a coordinate, you can see what to do with this, but literally the only thing you need to do is to click. So if we click here a few times, you see the coordinates according to the coordinate system we have chosen, which is a VGS 84, they all emerge here. And when that is ready, we can export it. And we can export it into a shapefile, which is the typical one for ArcGIS, KMZ, which is a very, very common one for Google Earth, or CSV, which is a very, very common one for all the, well, Excels and other sort of computational sort of files and materials. All we could is, as in this case, just clear all and make sure that we have it for the future. This is very useful if you, for instance, have a photo that is mapped and you want to point the locations of specific sets of observations that you want to keep for later and then save it out. You don't need to do any fuss and go into trying to match it to other kinds of materials. Just very easy, click and go. The labeling part is also interesting. The labeling here, I wouldn't start here, in fact. I would start it by going here. As you can see for the lines, they do already have labels. We see it here, and the labels are in this case a 0. And this is, well, not very practical. So what I would do, if I go for a line and I go for label properties, I end up here, and you see something relatively complex, in fact. So if I'm going for this, you can see the expression it wants for is $ feature ID. If I take that away and just double click instead for some text, as you probably remember, that's where we had the name of them, short, long, and so forth. If I go for that one and just add feature some text and apply, you could see that the names are instead being replaced. So, or shown. Another line, short line, long line, very long line, and so forth. You can specify it using an SQL statement You can do and set and change the visibility for various kinds of lines and regulations. Not really what we're going to do at this very moment. You can do a lot of things with it. You can convert it to graphics, for instance, or to what is called annotations, which is literally, well, semi-labels between graphics and labels where you can move around text boxes. So there's a lot of things you can do. Finally, there's an option for you to download maps. This is something that is common to do if you, for instance, work on a train and you haven't got internet and the license doesn't allow you, or the material you've got that you're using are map-based. You literally then sort of select that you want to include the base map and the tiles, and, well, you download and continue using it. That will be the first section, the map part of it. If I'm going to the insert, you see I've got a few other options coming up. A new map would give me an entirely new map. As you can see, an entirely new one, a fresh start if you like. I can also add a new layout. A new layout is what it is. It tells us the story. We can choose anything and we can make it into a section where we're actually drawing maps. In this case, I'm not going to use it, so I'm going to turn that down because that's for later moments and studies. Sorry. And report, which is, well, I would say at this stage it is fairly uncommon to use. It is a way of reporting of the material, the graphics, the files and everything in it. You can control what kinds of things goes out as more or less as a PDF format. I will not do it at the moment. Thereafter you have a few of a little bit more interesting but also relatively rarely used ones. A new presentation, for instance, where you can insert a page and, well, make a presentation. Here we start with the high, for instance. Let me see this one and that one, insert. So the first one, and then we make a new slide, insert page, and then we do the next one, in this case being empty, as you could see. Then you can make it, well, the traditional, almost as a PowerPoint or something similar, but you run it directly from ArcGIS. Just have to find my way back. I do that using a trick where I right click and choose zoom to layer. And let me see, if we go for the map section and I make sure that I see all the things again and insert, then we got the opportunity also to go for a new notebook. The notebook is literally a possibility for you to go scripting. We're not going to do that either, but there's an opportunity to do it. You can run the code and make it integrated with the projects you've got. You have a possibility to add a toolbox, create new ones, or refresh. As you can see, there's a lot of various kinds of thingies. We'll come to the toolbox setting at a later stage. In fact, actually the next tab, so I can return to see and show you more there. When you go to this one, import, you could import various new kinds of maps. So say that you have a map from an earlier version or for some other software. You can, not always, but sometimes import and make it part of this software. You can import a layout. Literally, if you're very, very happy with the design that you've got, the coloration and the width and the other kinds of things of the object that you have created, you can use that design at a later stage. And the same goes with task, which is literally just a list of things that you list as grocery shopping and go listing what you need to do at the next stage. It can be used in a more sort of automated way, but we're not going to these thingies at this very moment. You have an opportunity also to connect it to databases, to servers, to cloud stores and whatnot, BIM, perhaps if you've got the BIM project coming along. But all these things are so super more complex, so we will keep it for a later moment. And finally, you can go something when it comes to called add folder. And add folder is literally not a file, but it's telling us a story that everything we're interested in is located within this folder, perhaps the 2025. That one is already sort of included. But if I would have included, for instance, the Maldives file and press OK, you could see that turns up here. Now I have the 2025, which is the folder where I got this material, but with the Maldives ones, I've got an opportunity to see a few other files. That is, well, they are not located in Oslo, I can tell you. We have something called new investigation, which I will not devote any time to at the moment. Looking at these ones, layer templates, we have an opportunity to have a preset set of colorations and schemes for the objects that you can use for the materials. So as you can see, pastel, colors, or paired, matte, and so forth. So these are alternatives. I would say the majority of these ones are not particularly useful in the early parts of usage. In these ones you could design your own styles and apply them for later, or you could add various kinds of items more or less as you have seen in the earlier stages. So let's keep it at that and move to the next one, analysis. The analysis tab is an interesting one, and it also have a few features that we will use fairly early on, but very many of them will not be used until very late stages. The main one is the toolbox. And if I click this one, I've got favorites, in this case the ones I'm using often, or the toolboxes, which is a very, very complicated set of not complicated, but a complex set of functions that you can use. Analysis tools, proximity, and whatnot, all of these are old favorites and friends to us when we are working with GIS. There are so many, so literally the best way of finding your things here is to go for something much near to you, which is the function of search. And then you can find whatever you need, and you know what kinds of discussion you've got and how you could use it. So this is how we are using the toolbox, right? Oops. Sorry for that one. Now, we do have some ready-to-use tools that are easy to just sort of apply to the system. We will not use it at this moment because it requires us to have a little bit more knowledge about the overall selections. We have something else that is quite very interesting at the later stage, not now, the model builder. The model builder allows us to drag and drop tools and files onto this platform and design a script for what are to be done and run. It's very, very interesting. And say that you've got an everyday temperature probe that you collect data from, and you want to do the analysis every single day, but you're fed up of doing all the steps. So you literally generate a model builder where you say something, start this, you get the material, run these kinds of analysis, and instead of doing it separately, you have it in the model builder, you press the run, and you make it work. Very similar in a fashion of having different alternatives as we had for the ready-to-use tools. As you can see, we have a few interesting ones when it comes to methods that we think that could be useful in the future. So always keep a lookout for these features and opportunities. But since this is the beginning of the GIS course, I think it's not necessary to go through all the functions at this very moment. I would go and also just have a very quick look at these ones. The raster function, for instance, has sort of similar possibilities and workings when it comes to making sort of rasters work and integrate and do very kinds of interesting things. But at this point, it's just too early to work with the rasters. So let's keep it and move on in this way. The view one has got a few interesting ones. First of all, you could convert this two-dimensional scene to a global scene, which then would mean that it's a possibility for us to see what it would look like if we had it on, well, a Google Earth kind of a landscape. So doing it, it takes a few moments, of course, before it's ready. But when I'm done and I've got this kind of material on it, let me see, so I've got all the tools, I could, generate a lot of interesting stuff, and I can make this. Let me see, here we go, I think it is. I can tilt it over, and I can operate it and see, and I could also make objects 3D. Now, this is not what we're doing at this very moment, so I leave it at that. Another thing that I think is interesting to show is that you can here toggle up the various kinds of box we have. So if you, for some reason, lose them, You have an opportunity by going to view and toggle on and off sort of in this case, the catalog. You've got the catalog view, contents, and tasks and so forth, the things that quite commonly appear up here. A very useful one is this one, where you're doing stuff, and you know there are lots of people. I've heard sometimes that almost approximately 10% of the male population has some sort of color vision deficiency, if that's the right word, I don't know. But you could then simulate and see what it would look like for those kinds of groups of individuals, and see if your colorations and choices actually hold for a wider group of individuals. So that's quite interesting, I would say. I'd say this is probably what we need to for these kinds, and I move on to the edit function. The edit function is where you can go in and edit the material that you already got. Say that, for instance, you want to prolong one of these lines. If I select this line, let me see, I go and select it, and I go select this one. I can go for modify, and I can move it a little bit, as you saw here. And when I'm done with it, I just click down here, and that will be the new location of it. I can also create new material. If I click the create one and go for instance, the few points, I might add a new point. And here we go with the new point. And save the material and the edits. And this is now part of the file that you will have when you're looking into it for your teachings. As you saw, we can do selections or stop selecting it and zooming in and zooming out depending on what kinds of things you want to do. And if you want to have help with the editing, you see, going for the editor tool, you've got lots and lots of various kinds of things you can run. For instance, how to make a cul-de-sac, or to make things that are more or less a little bit complicated when you're running it freehand with a cursor. We will go through editing at the later stage, so I'll leave it at this. From going to imagery, we've got a few image functions, as you saw already before, and the same goes for the function template. These are the things we also saw in the insert kind of perspective. I think the most of these ones are too complex at the moment to be used, but you'll always have an opportunity to look for them themselves. In this version, the later versions, you have even deep learning tools where you can train your model or your software, your local software, to comply to the things you are doing, which is quite interesting. Share. You can here share the project with others. Literally, that means that it contains all the material that you need. So when you are sending a file to me, just don't send one of the files and believe it that it's going to work. But you do it here instead. Go to the share and select the project, and it will try to collect all the material necessary to share it with me. And then I have the entire project. It's just the map. Well, do this. If you want to do it for something that could be shown on a phone, you got it there, and so forth, right? So you got various kinds of objects. And a useful one, of course, is eventually you need to go for output and export map. And when you choose export map, you come here and you can choose what kinds of format you want to have. PNG, for instance, and choose a location and define the number of pixels and just export. Well, and finally, of course, you got the help. And that's, well, something you should use much and often. Thank you.